Greetings to you all. This is Tendai Dumbuchena, the host of the podcast Crisis in Africa. Welcome to episode 8, which discusses renewed calls for the United Kingdom to pay reparations for colonialism and slavery following the death of its monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. The reparations are for the economic exploitation of colonies, mainly through the extraction of minerals and expropriation of land. Financial compensation is also demanded for crimes against humanity, which include torture, imprisonment, massacres, and genocide. Equally important are demands for reparations for the slave trade, which shipped Africans from their continent to work on plantations in America and Caribbean islands. This demand is made by descendants of slaves in the United States and the Caribbean. The Caribbean community, CARICOM, filed a motion with the International Criminal Court in The Hague demanding that the United Kingdom, France, and Netherlands pay reparations for slavery and its legacy and for the genocide of indigenous populations. In the United States, the demand goes beyond slavery to cover the brutal violence and discrimination African Americans were subjected to after the constitutional abolition of slavery in 1865. The theme of this podcast is for Africans to focus on developing their nations and continent to a point where they become significant players on the global stage. While Africans have the right to demand compensation for the harm colonialism inflicted on them, energy should not be expended on seeking the holy grail of reparations. Former European colonial powers do not accept responsibility for what their forebears did. The bill for reparations would be too high for their citizens to accept. No legislature in the United States, United Kingdom, France, the Netherlands, Spain, and Portugal will sanction the payment of reparations for colonialism and/or slavery. Furthermore, black people in Africa, the United States, and Caribbean do not have the power to put pressure on their former oppressors to seriously consider paying reparations. There is a great power imbalance between developing African and Caribbean nations and the white developed world. These black nations still depend on aid and budgetary support from their former colonial masters and enslavers. There's also another reason former European colonial powers do not entertain reparations. They do not subscribe to the view that colonialism was an evil system that exploited and brutalized its subjects. They hold the view that colonialism brought civilization and economic upliftment to backward lands. In the case of Africa, the view that Europeans brought light and God to a dark continent was conventional wisdom. The only concession they are prepared to make is to acknowledge incidents of what are now called crimes against humanity, such as torture, massacres, and genocide. Germany finally accepted in 2021 culpability for the genocide that cost the lives of at least 65,000 Herero and Nama people between 1904 and 1908 in present-day Namibia. A paltry sum of 1.1 billion euros was allocated to communities affected by the genocide. Another small victory played out in the British courts, which in 2013 awarded £20 million to 5,228 living survivors of Mau Mau fighters killed in Kenya in the 1950s. The conservative government of the day made it clear, as if to inoculate itself against bigger compensation claims, that it was unwilling to accept responsibility for the acts of colonial administrations. The United Nations General Assembly has passed several resolutions in support of reparations for colonialism and slavery, but these are non-binding. The moral weight they carry is insufficient to move the needle on this issue. It is important to point out that, like so many issues in international relations and human rights, it is powerful nations that have the final say. The UN Security Council cannot pass a legally binding resolution on reparations because it would be vetoed by the United States, France, United Kingdom, and yes, Russia, which for centuries was an imperial power in Eastern Europe and Northern Asia. It is also important to point out that reparations are normally imposed by a victorious party over a vanquished one. They are a consequence of losing a war. Germany was required to pay 132 billion gold marks by the Treaty of Versailles, which ended the First World War. West Germany paid $7 billion to Israel for the Holocaust. Iraq is still paying Kuwait for its invasion of the Gulf state in 1991. Without power or the backing of powerful allies, the weak suffer what they must. Debate on reparations for colonialism and slavery must not be stifled, but the focus of Africans and their brothers and sisters in the diaspora must be to build their nations into powerful and prosperous ones. If they fail in this mission, they will forever toe the line of agendas set by the powerful. I thank you. Listeners, do you think demands for reparations are worth pursuing? What could persuade or force former colonial powers to pay reparations? Or should black people just forget about reparations and focus on building their nations? Please post your comments below.